Hi folks, this is Dean Curry of Fantasy Football RSVP. This is our podcast for Waiver Wire number 10. The show is created by me and my buddy Jeff Ice, the Curry and Ice Show. And everything falls under Fantasy Football RSVP, of which I'm the owner and creator of the podcast. Let's talk about Waiver Wire number 10. It's getting late in the season. You have to start thinking about what you need to do at this point of the season in order to get into the playoffs. So what I would do in Waiver Wire 10 is I would start to look under, what you need to do as far as where you are, and if you're not in the playoffs, you have to start thinking about what teams you need to catch in order to get into the playoffs. So maybe that might involve a trade, maybe that might be picking up the right players. But you got to start figuring out if there's a way for you to get into the playoffs. So you have to look at the last two teams that are in the playoffs right now, and you have to figure out a way that perhaps you can catch them. I mean, who knows? Maybe you could trade them players that are in a bye week in 2 weeks, and you're going to be playing him, or something to that degree. Or maybe you have players that already that are going to have a bye week, and he has players that already have not had their bye week. And then what you need to do is make that trade, so then he essentially loses players for a week, which is very, very important. Anyway, let's talk about Waiver Wire 10. I released an earlier video talking about this, and I stressed, I don't know if you heard that podcast episode, but I was telling everyone to, get Des Bryant. I figured by this point, and this is before he started to, try out for the Saints. I just knew that somebody was going to snatch this guy up, and I was telling everyone a few days ago on an earlier podcast to pick up Des Bryant, because there might be a scenario where a wide receiver goes down, which happened on the Saints with Ginn, and that is a weak spot for him, and he's well rested. He's been training. By this point of the season, Des Bryant's usually breaking down after a long season, but now he's fresh. And I'm sure he's very strong. I mean, he's releasing workout videos of himself to that degree, and he just is healthy. And I was urging people to pick him up. And, as far as my own teams, and that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to talk about your own teams, but just to tell you that I do the things that I try to tell you guys to do, is I actually picked up Des Bryant on every single one of my leagues that I was in. And he's on my team, and 3 days later, it was rumored he's working out with the Saints, and now he's on the Saints, and I have him. And I know Ted Ginn. I know that he didn't get a ton of play when he was on the Saints, or when he was healthy. He wasn't healthy a lot this year, but last year he was getting 3 or 4 catches a game. And someone was asking me, do you think that Des Bryant's only going to get 3 or 4 catches a game? No, because Des Bryant is a much better receiver than Ginn. And it's not only that, Des Bryant, Ginn's a speed horse. You put him out there, he runs, he tries to outrun everyone on a long pass. of 40, 50 yards, and he stretches the field. But, you know, Des Bryant can out-jump people. He's a jump ball guy where they could just throw it to a jump ball. And if he's in single coverage, he's a very dangerous player. I mean, that guy gets almost every jump ball imaginable, you know? And that's why a lot of times, even when he wasn't getting thrown to a lot in the Cowboys, he was getting double teamed every time. And then people wonder why, you know, Zeke Elliott is not getting the correct yards or the right yards these days. And it's pretty obvious that they're loading the box against Zeke Elliott. And even though Des Bryant wasn't catching, you know, 10 passes, 100 yards last year, I would watch those games, those Dallas games when they were on, and I was watching them, and he was getting double teamed at least 60 to 70% of the time. And that opens up the box, and that's what Des Bryant does. He's not Ginn. You know, he could out-jump people, and he's also a possession receiver. He catches, he's almost like a slot receiver, wide receiver. He could run in the slot and do those like little short passes, and he's extremely dangerous after he, you know, catches the ball because he's an extremely physical runner. He demands attention. Ginn doesn't demand attention. And when you have a guy like Thomas on your team that's getting double teamed, that's almost a guarantee that Des Bryant is going to get single covered. And if he gets single covered, he's going to put up some monster numbers. You know, both on short passes and long passes and jump balls. You know, you single cover this guy. I mean, that's just like a walk in the park for Des Bryant. And he's going to get single covered because they're going to double team Thomas. You know, and it's going to cause a huge ripple effect on that team, and it's going to make things easier for Kamara, Ingram, I mean the whole rest of the team, because this guy is just going to demand attention, and he's healthy. And that's why I was urging everyone to pick up Des Bryant. A lot of people, you know, I'm getting comments like, you know, who knows if he'll even play this year. And I was just telling everyone he's going to play this year. You know, he turned down a couple of contracts he could have been playing. And, you know, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but, or gals, but on November 29th, Thursday Night Football, Des Bryant is going to the Cowboys Stadium for a revenge game against Dallas. I mean, that's just something, you know, that it doesn't get better than that. Get your popcorn ready, because that's something I definitely 100% want to see. And I know he's got that marked on his calendar. You know, revenge game in Cowboys Stadium, Des Bryant coming back. And, you know, what a lot of people don't understand, and, you know, I hear a lot of podcasts, you know, every podcaster like myself should really listen to other people's points of view as well, not just the tweets and, you know, stuff that I get from people, from the general public, but, you know, we should all watch each other's podcasts just to get ideas and learn and stuff like that. And, you know, I watch a lot of podcasts of people out there, you know, just you know, to hear what they have to say, perspective. It might change your mind on something. And, you know, I hear a lot of people, you know, saying things, you know, about certain players that maybe, you know, not be performing as well as they once did in fantasy football. You know, perfect example would be Lamar Miller. And, you know, I know a lot of people say things and they're joking and stuff like that, and it's not really meant, but Lamar Miller was a fantastic fantasy player for years. I mean, the shelf life of a running back is not that long, and this guy has been around over 10 years. And, you know, there were times I had that. First of all, he's a professional football player, and the window to become a professional football player is so small. And anyone that makes it in the National Football League or any professional league, I mean, frankly, should be commended, because the hoops they have to jump through and the competition, and there's only a few jobs available. And Lamar Miller is someone that's been doing it, you know, I mean, this guy, even last year, he was putting up double-digit points in receiving consistently. And now he's older for a running back. And, I hear a lot of negative, comments, and I know people just want him to perform for them. But, the Texans aren't showcasing him either. It's not like Lamar Miller's getting 20, 25, carries a game, and getting thrown to 5 to 10 times a game. He's getting maybe 10 carries a game, if even. They got Blue going in there, or they're just not running the ball. And he's not even getting passed like he was last year that much either. So yes, his numbers are down, but his touches are considerably down too. There were a couple of games where he did well, where he actually got the touches. My point to you is this, I understand, players, get older and stuff like that. And, we all want to win fantasy football and stuff like that. But these players, they're a select few. And, I hear a lot of negative feedback. Personally, intelligent comments, really. This is a professional football player, and he performed well for many, many years. And one guy you might want to look at is D'Onta Foreman, who's coming in, because he has been ready to come back for quite some time now, and for some reason they're just holding him back. There was even some talk about him being ready for the first game of the season, or the second or third, and they put him on IR anyway, and he's ready, and he's going to start practicing full this week, and he could make. Last year he looked incredible once he got going, and if he is 90% of what he was, he's going to really help that that Texans team. And you might want, on the waiver wire, pick up D'Onta Foreman, because he's going to go in there, and now they have Demaryius Thomas, and Demaryius Thomas, a lot of people like, oh, I don't even know if he's good as Fuller. Well, again, I'm talking about Des Bryant. Demaryius Thomas is very much like Des Bryant, although Des Bryant, the better catcher of the ball. Demaryius makes a lot of drops, but they are both physical runners. And these physical runners, like Brandon Marshall of old, demand attention, because if they get the ball, they basically run you over and out physical you, and they need 1 or 2 or 3 guys to tackle these guys, and it just demands attention. And that's what Demaryius Thomas does, and he's going to open things up considerably for Hopkins and their running game, because this guy, he may not catch every ball thrown to him, but he's pretty dangerous. In his first game, he looked pretty good. So D'Onta Foreman, I would definitely pick up. I think the pickup of the week, which I mentioned in another episode a few days back, was Duke Johnson. And if he's still available, by all means, pick him up. The Coach Williams is old school. This guy likes to run the ball, likes to use the tight end, and Njoku, if he's available, might also be someone to look at. And I know these guys have underperformed certain weeks, and you just want to turn your back on them, but you really don't want to do that. Like guys like Dalvin Cook, just because they haven't performed, and say, oh, I'm never playing that guy, or Lamar Miller, oh, I'm never going to play, because there may present an opportunity where that's a good play. Like, for example, in Alex Smith, who I never play in fantasy, and anytime I've ever played him, he's put up a bad number for me. But there has also been weeks where Alex Smith has put up big numbers. I seem to never get it right I don't play him a lot. I only played him probably a handful of times in the last few years. And I tried to sneak him into a lineup. He wasn't a regular quarterback for me. It just didn't work out for me, which, even Michael Jordan misses shots from time to time, and you're going to miss shots, but it was the right move. But, he's going up. Alex Smith is going up against, and I'll get back to Duke Johnson in a second, but Alex Smith is going up against Tampa Bay. And, you might have a quarterback on a bye week, and you might, also have a tough matchup for a quarterback. And Alex Smith, and again, I've been disappointed on Alex Smith before, but you can't personalize things in fantasy football. And, I can't say that I've won every single league I've ever played in, but in an uncanny way, I mean, if I don't know how many leagues I've played in the last number of years, but I've won almost all the time or finished second, and I'm always making the playoffs. And, sooner or later, I'm good. Everything's just going to go wrong in one league, and, I'm not going to do well. And that also happens in fantasy football. Sometimes you just have a year where everything you do, just goes bust, and it happens to the best of us. But one of the reasons why I think I've really excelled is I really look at the matchups for the playoffs, and I look at the matchups later in the year, and I also look at things to that nature, especially the upcoming matchups in the playoffs and towards the end of the year. And a lot of time, there's been years I've squeaked in the playoffs, and then I just put up ridiculous points in the, during the regular season. I put up ridiculous points in the playoffs because, plays like an Alex Smith against Tampa Bay, and I had a tough bye week, or my quarterback is going up against a tough defense, and you put them in, and people have just been raking up points against Tampa Bay, and now they have the gunslinger Fitzmagic in there, and he's also a great play. Even though, Washington has a good defense, you're definitely playing Fitzmagic, this week. I mean, I have Fitzmagic on my team, Fitzpatrick, and Wentz. And, Wentz is going up against Dallas's defense, and I know Wentz is a better quarterback than Fitzmagic, and Fitzmagic going up against Washington's defense, which is very good too. But chances are the Bucs are going to be losing that game. And when they lose, you got to think of game scripts also. If he's losing that game, you got to think, wow, if he's going to be down 2 touchdowns, they're going to abandon the run. Not that their running game has been that good anyway, but they're going to start airing it out because they're behind. And the Redskins type of game, Redskins have a good team. They didn't play great last week, but they have a good team and a good defense. They're kind of banged up on the offensive line, which means they're probably not going to run it as much. And their Peterson all day had a tough time running the ball the other day because their offensive line is banged up. And one thing people do when the offensive line is banged up is they go to the shotgun. And when they go to the shotgun, they try to pass the ball, obviously. They don't hand it off a lot. Sometimes they do in a shotgun, but rarely. And they go to the shotgun because they're going to just do little, dink and dunk passes instead of running the ball and then just get the ball out of there because the offensive line isn't holding people up. It gives the quarterback another half a second to throw the ball, which is huge. And that's probably what's going to happen. And there's probably going to be a pretty high score in that game, even though Washington's got a good defense, because I think Tampa Bay is going to be playing from behind, and he's just going to air it out, Fitzmagic, and you might want to pick him up. And, it's going to be important for Washington to keep pressure on the Bucs. So they're going to have to air it out just because, the Bucs are hanging it around, and they're going to have to keep pushing. And you might actually see a higher score in that game, which, typically I wouldn't think those two teams would. Well, at least the Bucs would, but not Washington. But it has a game script recipe for being a high-scoring game, which is another reason you might want to look at Adam Humphries, because he has been showcased a wide receiver for the Bucs, and they're using him more than Godwin. And this is becoming the football league of the slot receiver, whether it be Cooper Kupp or Adam Thielen. It just seems like things are going that way. And, this guy's got almost 30 targets in 3 weeks, or he actually has about 31 or 29, targets in 3 weeks and touchdowns. And it looks like he's the perfect recipe for Fitzmagic, who loves airing the ball out. And now he has his dump-off receiver, when things are a little backed up, which they were. And he's becoming like the second option. Oh, the long pass is covered. That guy back there is covered. Dump it off to Humphreys. And he had, 10-plus targets. And it's the perfect recipe for a gunslinger. Always wants that guy over the middle on the second or third option. If he's looking left, covered, looking right, covered. And then, where's my, guy over the middle? And he's the safety net. And that's what Adam Humphreys is becoming. So you might want to consider, picking him up. As far as other wide, Duke Johnson, Deonta Foreman. Let me get back to Duke Johnson. Yeah, Williams is an old school coach. He's the guy who wants to throw it over the middle, to dump off to the receiver, run screens, include the tight end. He wants a balanced attack, and he made it plainly obvious. I think, Duke Johnson had 6 or 7, targets in the first half alone, and that's going to continue. And, again, I don't really like talking about my leagues, but I was surprised that I was able to pick up Duke Johnson in almost all my leagues. It was almost like he was completely ignored. And, I make these episodes so people can hear them, and I know people in my own league might have heard them. And this guy's going to finish the year really strong because they want to include Duke Johnson because he's a great recipe for Baker Mayfield. A guy that you could throw it over the middle to on a short pass screen. It's a high percentage play, takes the pressure off Baker Mayfield, throwing it to the tight end, Njoku, on a short pass, and then occasionally airing it out to Landry. And Landry's been really struggling. But the reason why he's struggling is they don't have a balanced attack. So I saw the Charger game against the Browns. They're double and triple teaming Landry at times. And the only way to stop that from happening is to start, hitting guys on screens, hitting, running backs coming out of the backfield on short passes, hitting, a big tight end like Njoku and a bullish runner. He's tough to tackle after he catches the ball. That will draw attention. Of course, Chubb running the ball would help a little bit. Mayfield may actually, I'm not a big fan of, quarterbacks running, but he may have to move around a little bit more. He's kind of sitting in the pocket. I'm not necessarily saying he's got to run for yardage because I don't think that recipe really works, but at times he should do what Russell Wilson does, and that he just moves around in the pocket so he could get better, positioning and move those defensive linemen around and make them tired, and so he could pass the ball. And occasionally, take off because that will keep the defense honest. But I really think Duke Johnson's going to be huge, and I think Njoku's numbers are going to climb. Deonta Foreman, Fitzmagic. For tight end and wide receiver, you should focus on one team, and that's the Colts with Andrew Luck. Jack Doyle is coming back at tight end. Andrew Luck absolutely loves throwing to this guy. Absolutely loves throwing to this guy. And, he has Ebron too, but they're probably going to go with a 2 tight end set from time to time. But, Jack Doyle, I even saw it in the last game, he's just getting back in, and Luck just starts throwing to him, left and right. And, he's going to finish really strong. And don't worry about Ebron, because Ebron is a different type of tight end. So they both offer 2 different things. And, Ebron goes down the field a little bit more, stretches the field a little bit more, but Jack Doyle's the more possession tight end, and that's what Andrew Luck likes when 1 or 2 receivers are covered. Jack Doyle is his safety net, his dump-off guy, and that's what guys who like to be gunslingers love having, and he's going to love having Jack Doyle back, and he's going to finish really, really strong. And a wide receiver that is now coming off a bye week that you may want to consider is Ryan Grant. Ryan Grant is a really good receiver, and Chester Rogers really isn't doing it for Andrew Luck. And Andrew Luck, like a lot of quarterbacks and Aaron Rodgers, they like to trust the guys that they trust. And, they're very loyal and like to use the guys that they have a prior relationship with. And Ryan Grant, for weeks now they said he was coming back. He's coming back. He's day to day. But he still didn't come back, and I think they were purposely holding him off so after the bye week, he has a leg injury. After the bye week, he would be 100% healthy, just like Dalvin Cook. I'm actually surprised they played Dalvin Cook last week, but he looked great. One of my leagues, I picked him up, and, I was surprised to pick him up. I dropped him, and I thought for sure, there's no way I wasn't low on the waiver wire. It's actually high on the waiver wire, and no one picked him up. And, Murray they now have 2 more weeks to recover, and Dalvin Cook has looked really good last game. And I think he outtouched, Murray already. And he almost had another touchdown. He was basically walking in and got tripped up. And, had he got in there, everyone would be singing his praises, 2-touchdown game and all these things. But he looked really good, and he was extremely fast on his 75-yard run for the touchdown. I was like, wow, he looks good. And now he has 2 weeks to rest. If he's available, which I highly doubt, I would pick him up. If you could trade for him, I'd do that too. But Des Bryant, we mentioned Ryan Grant coming back. You got to pick him up. Andrew Luck loves throwing to this guy, and Hilton, and now you have Doyle back, and things are going to be open, and Ryan Grant is the second receiver, and a lot of people have forgotten about Ryan Grant, and how special a player he is. And these are the type of finds that you have to pick up, and, you have to pick up players that nobody's thinking about, that perhaps are coming back from injury and are going to be healthy. I mean, I may not start Ryan Grant until I see that he looks like the Ryan Grant of old, so I'd keep him on my bench. It's better to be a little late than early, by a week. But if he comes this week and does really well, I would consider definitely picking him up. I mean, definitely playing him the following week if he shows promise. Like if he has 5 catches for 50 or 60 yards, that may not be a high fantasy number, but that's a true sign that he's back and that his numbers are probably going to double the following week or something to that degree. A very interesting player that I was able to pick up recently and I know he's available on a lot of people's leagues, is Ito Smith. And he may not seem like a very sexy player to that degree, but let me tell you something about Ito Smith. This guy caught more balls as a running back in college than almost any other running back. I mean, the numbers were ridiculous, like 50, 60 receptions, 45 receptions for a running back. That's like 80 or 90 or 100 receptions for the National Football League, because they don't throw to running backs like that in college. And for him to have numbers in the 40s, 50 for a receiver, I mean, this guy's an unrealized talent. And Coleman, their running back, is in a contract year. They're not going to re-sign him. And they already have Freeman. As the year goes on and they play more and more meaningless games, which they're going to be playing meaningless games, Atlanta, because they're not going to make the playoffs, there is no reason whatsoever to showcase Coleman anymore. And, Freeman's on IR, so he's out for the rest of the fantasy playoffs. So they're going to actually want to see, they're not going to want to pay Coleman, they're going to want to see what they have in Ito Smith. So he is a guy, I wouldn't say play him, but if you have room on your bench, put him on your bench. His numbers are going to climb little by little as the year goes on. And as you get closer and closer to the playoffs, he may become very fantasy relevant. And they seem to always want to give him the ball already on the goal line, which gives him even more significance. So it's something you definitely want to consider. As far as defenses, trying to think of what defenses might be available. Obviously, the Chargers defense would be great to play against Oakland, but chances are the Chargers are not available on your waiver wire list. But there is a team that probably is available that no one picked up, and that is the Jets defense. And I know people like to frown for the Jets. You know, I'm a New Yorker myself, Jet Giant fan, and you know, I'm just a fan of sports and football. I could watch any team in any game and enjoy it. But, you know, people are down on the Jets, and they don't want to play any Jet players because they think they're insignificant when it comes to fantasy football. And this is what I'm talking about, the mindset of being closed-minded to a possible win. If you look at the scores against the Bills for defenses, you know, and, you know, Jets are playing the Bills on defense. So if you look at the Bills, what the last, you know, 9 weeks has been, you will see the defense that was playing against the Bills put up double-digit numbers. I mean, the numbers are ridiculous, like 15, 18, 20, 29. I had the Bears last week, you know, 29, 16, 14. And, you know, I'm just looking at these numbers, and I'm like, you know, every team that played the Bills on defense put up a double-digit number on defense. And to put up double-digit numbers like 15, 18, 16, 20, when you get a defense to put, even last week up 29, when you have a defense put up those types of points, it's almost like guaranteed you're going to win that week. So, you know, again, playing the Jets, you know, defense is a risk. But if you look at the Jets defense, their numbers are not bad. They've been putting up 8s and 10s and 12s and, you know, a couple of lower numbers, 5s and 6s, but almost all positive numbers on their defense for fantasy football. And they have quite a number of double-digit scores. So they're a very, very underrated defense. And they're playing at home. And I would definitely consider playing the Jets defense over the Bills, because the Bills, you know, they're going through a lot of transition right now. I don't like to say anything bad. They have good defense. They're a national football team, and anything could happen, but they're struggling to find their identity. And they'll figure it out eventually when they get their quarterback, Allen, back. But I would think of playing the Jets defense, definitely, for this game. And the Jets really need a defense. They're at home. And chances are they put up a good number. As far as kickers, a good, you know, just one other point. A lot of people have been talking to me about Valdez-Scantling for the Green Bay Packers because, you know, Geronimo Allison is out, and they're calling it the pick of the week and the waiver wire pick of the week and, you know, all these things. I would maybe hold off on that a little bit, and I'll tell you why. And everyone I've been talking to, anyone who's anyone, Valdez-Scantling, oh, he's, you know, Geronimo Allison's out. Yeah, you know, is anyone paying attention to the fact that Geronimo Allison's numbers weren't that great even before he got injured? I mean, he was putting up like 5 and 50, and 4 and 40, you know, 6 catches, 60, 65 yards, a lot of 3, 4, 5 catches, a lot of outputs of 30, 40, 50 yards. Wasn't that great? You know, and this is somebody that Aaron Rodgers had a relationship with. You know, he doesn't have a relationship with Valdez-Scantling. Yeah, I mean, he's starting to develop one in chemistry. But, you have to also understand, everyone's telling me Valdez-Scantling's the number 2 receiver on the team. He's the number 2 receiver on the team. He's going to get targets. He's going to help me win my league. Well, I don't know what people are thinking, because he's not the second receiver. Randall Cobb is the second receiver. He's just been injured. And again, these quarterbacks like Luck, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, they like throwing to the ball to people they know and people they have a relationship with. They're funny that way. They just don't like newness. And if Randall Cobb's injury keeps getting better and it looks like he's starting to come around, he's active now, he's starting to get into games, and, his legs, hamstring, or whatever other nagging injuries he has starts to, feel like the old Randall Cobb, Valdez-Scantling becomes the third, receiver, and they throw to the other guy, the Saint guy, Pierre, and they're including him also. And the one thing about McCarthy's offense is you can't guess what that guy's going to do. It's like playing Aaron Jones, and then Aaron Jones puts up a horrible number like he did last week. Because the week before he does well, and then Aaron Jones puts up a bad number, because McCarthy, he's one of the hardest people to guess on fantasy football. And I would be very wary to just assume Valdez-Scantling is going to do, really, really well. I mean, he had a decent week last week, but again, Allison was hurt. Cobb was just coming back, and he's not in the right form yet. But when Cobb gets in there, and he's the Cobb of old, you're going to see Aaron Rodgers throwing to him, and it's just a guessing game. I'm just not big on teams that have a third receiver that you're going to put all your money into. I mean, the only one that I would probably think of doing that with is Cooper Kupp. But you could argue that he's not really the third receiver, he's really the second receiver. And he's a slot receiver. So, slots get a lot of passes, and it's a growing position in national, in football. So anyway, I would not just pick up Valdez-Scantling, but if a guy like Cortland Sutton is available on Denver, I would definitely pick him up off waivers. I've been telling everyone that for weeks now. And, a lot of people like, well, Demaryius Thomas, when he was, on the team, he wasn't getting, a lot of targets and stuff. And he was getting a lot of targets. And it's funny when people say someone's not getting targets when they are, because he didn't have a lot of receptions. He was getting a lot of targets, Demaryius Thomas. He just was dropping the ball and not catching it, which is something he does. And even if his targets were down a little bit, it's because, Denver wanted to trade him, and they really want to showcase this Cortland Sutton. He's a jump ball specialist. He's not just fast, he's quick. He's quick, and they say he's an electric receiver, and they really want to throw to him, and he was getting a lot of the throws that would otherwise go to Demaryius Thomas. Now that Demaryius Thomas is not there, he's not going to have the same numbers as Demaryius Thomas. His numbers are going to actually go up. Because instead of 2 people, they have to throw to, you're going to be throwing to 1, and he's the guy they want to throw to. And now, Demaryius Thomas used to get double teamed quite a lot because he is, a physical runner and demands more attention and more double teams. And Sanders was open, but now Sanders is going to get double teamed. And you have to start thinking about these scenarios and how they play out. And when Sanders is double teamed, it's going to open up Cortland Sutton. So I would pick up Cortland Sutton before Valdez-Scantling. Although Scantling is not a horrible pick, I think it's more risky than a guy like Sutton. As far as kickers, no one really ever likes to talk about kickers, but, I have picked good kickers throughout the years and have outpointed people on defenses and kickers. And I've sort of, I don't want to say I'm a specialist, but I've sort of become one, because I put value on the kicker and defense. I mean, I see people play fantasy football. They play the same defense every week. And I consistently outpoint people by streaming defenses. And I know a lot of you do that. But it's something to consider. Even when I lose, one week I'm like, I'm always outpointing people on kicker because I look from, I'm not saying necessarily stream kickers, although I've done that from time to time and I know people that do it, find some success with it. But you want to look for a kicker, that has a good offense, not a great offense, a good offense. They can move the ball, but they have problems scoring in the red zone. Perfect recipe for a kicker. Lots of field goals. And you want to look for kickers that over the next, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks are going against defenses that are very good defenses in the red zone, meaning they prevent people from scoring. And if you could find a combination of that over the course of 4 or 5 weeks, that's the kicker you want, because the offense has problems scoring and getting in the red zone. They have a bad red zone offense is what it's called. And they're going up against a good red zone defense, over the next 4 or 5 weeks. And it's a reliable kicker. And, the question is who is that? And that would be Dustin Hopkins. And I know he only put up a couple of points last week because they only scored 2 touchdowns. But if you look at his points the other weeks, 8 weeks, he put up double-digit points almost every single week. And that's the reason why. And the thing is they're actually going, over the next 6 weeks, the Redskins are going up against 5 of the top, 10 defenses for red zone defense, preventing people from getting the defense. In fact, 4 of those teams are in the top 5. I think it's Dallas, the Eagles, Tennessee, the Jaguars, and the few weeks against the teams that are not in the top 10, they're in the top, 18. So top 16, top 18. So it's the perfect recipe. They're having problems scoring, but they have a good offense. Washington does with the running game and Peterson and all that, but they can't get in the end zone. And they're going up against defenses that are great in the red zone at preventing touchdowns. And that's a great recipe for field goal kickers. So if Dustin Hopkins is available, I would sincerely pick him up. And that would be it for Fantasy Football RSVP. I'm Dean Curry, the owner and the originator of all this material. And our buddy Jeff Ice will be joining us on the next episode for the Curry and Ice Show. You can subscribe to this channel. I try to update it as much as I can. Please subscribe to it. It's free to do it. And you could see my insights that I love giving you guys and gals. And, this advice works. It's worked for me many, many times. And you subscribe, you get all the updates. And it's just, and you could also make comments. I pretty much respond to any comment, whether it be here or on our Facebook business page, which is also under Fantasy Football RSVP. You could like us there. And I always try, and Twitter and, those same thing, Twitter, same name. And I always try to answer every single person that has a comment about their lineup. And it's just fun to be part of a fantasy football community. And that's why I started all this. So please subscribe and we'll be in touch. And I wish you all a terrific day, and I hope you all do well in week 10. And I will be having more videos to come shortly. So have a good day. This is Fantasy Football RSVP signing off.